Disney made new changes to their DAS system. We have a mom of an autistic child here to walk us through it all on this week's Magic Chat. Those are two hot things that I feel like we should know before hopping in.
Which really takes away from the experience of the people who really need it.
Publicly treated differently when using DAS. Holy DAS changes. April 9th was a huge DAS update with Disney. So they recently made announcements to update their DAS system, which a lot of people were saying were needed. So we're going to go over the few key DAS changes and then jump more into our use of DAS and whatnot. So will you kick us off, Kim, with the DAS changes?
Yeah, sure. So yes, huge changes. And I think it's really important to say what we know now, because there is a lot of vagueness around the changes. And what we do know now is that the changes will take effect at Walt Disney World on May 20th and at Disneyland on June 18th. Now, at Disneyland, we know there are two ways that you can apply for DAS. What we do know is that they are removing that in-person component at City Hall and Chamber of Commerce, and you can still apply in person at the ticket booths. But the preferred method of getting this access is doing the virtual queue, on the DAS website. Now, at Walt Disney World, what we're hearing is that there is no longer an in-person registration process at all, and it is fully virtual. So something to be aware of when you are requesting virtual, it is between 2 and 30 days prior to your trip. That still remains. What we also know is that at both parks, DAS is now valid for 120 days. And what's important by that is after you pass that 120 days, when you scan into the park on the first day, you will have to re-register. So that is a change. The changes really are, the eligibility for this is very focused on autism and neurodivergent guests. They're really calling that out this time, whereas before some of that eligibility was very vague.
Disney has also announced that they are going to be expanding their rider switch options. So this is going to really cover those people who are not covered under the new DAS rules. So for example, if you need access to restrooms for frequent or unexpected use, if you have a service animal, if the standby queue may trigger any anxiety or a sense of claustrophobia, or if you just prefer to sit and wait outside the queue due to mobility concerns and prefer not to use a mobility device, the rider switch option will now be available to you. So that way the rest of your party will be able to go stand in the regular standby queue, and then the person that is needing that access, they will be with that second party that is able to go through the lightning lane. They've also suggested that they're going to be doing a return to the line pass. So it's kind of like a return to the queue. The pass will allow the guests to return to the line if they need to leave the queue suddenly. So this is going to cover guests that have IBS, similar restroom concerns. They will be able to leave the queue, go do their business, and then come back as needed. Another update is this 10-minute booking delay. So once you scan in to your lightning lane as a DAS user, you won't be able to book another reservation for 10 minutes. It's not a huge change, but now there is a 10-minute delay, which could actually play in your favor. So that way you can actually enjoy the ride. And then once you're off, book your next ride. And finally, there will be no more advanced DAS reservations. So previously, a DAS participant could choose 2 rides in advance before their trip that they already had a window waiting for them when they showed up to the park that day, but now those will no longer be available.
Those are the really big key points that we know as of today, but I think again, we're probably going to see some changes and some clarity come out. There's been a lot of questions. So again, today, this is what we know.
And I think it's huge, just going back to the change of Disney has never given a set list of this is what we cover. And now they're making it really clear that it's for neurodivergent guests with autism or similar disabilities. And there were a lot of other individuals that used DAS that did not fall under that category. And so I'm just trying to feel for them, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are really like the people that approached me on Instagram were really those people that didn't fit under that autism, neurodivergent umbrella. And
Hmm.
they're saying like how big of a change that this is going to be for their family. And so I really feel for them. And I think if there's any grayness or you've received services before and now it's potentially changed, I would always say to call that 800 number on the DOS website and really just get some clarity. But I do think that Disney is still trying to accommodate those other guests, but we're just not sure what that looks like yet.
I have to like talk on that part because I appreciate that DAS is part of the lightning lane and that it does not call out anyone's differences or
Hmm.
disabilities. It's very just, subtle. No one knows really that you have a DAS pass.
Yeah.
But having that like ticket of, oh, I'm going to leave the line and then come back, obviously the people around you are going to know something is
Yeah.
going on, and that's where I feel I'm nervous to see that come about because I know I would not be comfortable with that.
Yeah, that's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out because, the first time we talked, you had asked me if I gotten any sort of looks for using DAS,
Yeah.
and I haven't. And that's what's made me feel really comfortable. And as I mentioned the first time we talked, is that's what's made us really successful and had,
Hmm.
really magical experiences with my son who's autistic. And I'm slightly concerned and worried about that. I would never want anyone to feel like they are being called out.
Hmm.
Part of all of this is like the inclusion
Yes.
and acceptance. So I think there's a lot more to come, and I think that's where a lot of the nerves are right now around this change.
Hmm. And I do feel I want to, give Disney credit because they have put together a great website with a lot of resources and just information for those who have different disabilities. And so there is a landing page, and I'll definitely drop that link down in the description. But they, of course, cover neurodivergent, but then they also cover a lot of information on mobility, service animals, deaf and hearing loss, and then also blind, low vision.
Mhm.
And I've clicked around in a lot of those. They're including like maps and different, just different resources on how to access the parks and then also the resorts. And they've even lined out like where the companion restrooms are, which you can also access in app as well. But different designated viewing areas where, information about EVC rentals. So I do feel like they're trying to do themselves justice because they just dropped this huge bomb on
Yeah.
the people that don't fall under that neurodivergent umbrella. But I do hope that something else comes for all of those other people that had a legitimate disability, because I know a lot of this is coming from people who were abusing it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to echo what you were saying. I do feel like Disney definitely gets like an A+ for effort. They are really trying to be
Hmm.
inclusive and really have that acceptance kind of mindset around Disneyland truly, and Disney is for everyone. But I think again, like there's just so much that is still unclear, but the root of this change is related to them cracking down on so many people taking advantage of the service, which really takes away from the experience of the people who really need it. And
Yeah.
so I fully support that. I think that's important. And, it's just there's these other kind of questions, but the root of it is really important and is needed.
Hmm. And I agree. And this is kind of going into like speculation a bit. And as you said, the whole program and the changes have not completely unfolded
Yep.
or even been put into place. But we have heard some things about this third party system, kind of like maybe even universal documentation type stuff.
Yes, so there is a third party that is now being brought in, Inspire Health Alliance, that are going to help cast members, decide who is eligible for this. And right now, we don't know how or what that looks like. At Universal, I have heard that it is very strict. There's a lot of work that has to go into ahead of time and documentation. So, still unclear on that right now. And, you know, I hope that that doesn't make this experience of registering harder. And I hope that it is still seamless. But I do hope that that adds that layer of being able to weed out the people who are just trying to take advantage. I also think that we should talk about, as we talked about earlier, is that there's now language on the Walt Disney World website that if you are found to be lying about this, and not needing the service, that you are going to have a lifetime ban. So they are really taking this very serious.
Yeah, I agree. And I also want to add on that I have seen stuff come out saying that this is also partially in that Disney kind of did not expect the amount of numbers of
Mm.
guests using this that are using this. And I can agree a lot of it does probably come from, guests who are trying to take advantage of the system and not being completely truthful, like call
Yep.
it for what it is. But then I also try to come from a very understanding place, and how you're saying Disney is for everyone. Is it that they have made this accessible and it's really just people feel empowered to use it, so they are using it, and it's coming to light that we do have a lot of like disabilities that are now like just I think really being diagnosed for what they are,
Yep.
and that people feel comfortable coming to Disney because there is this awesome program.
Yeah. And that's kind of like what is pulling a little bit on my heart is that, first of all, for me and my family, my son is autistic. That we fit under this umbrella, and I know that under the neurodivergent umbrella, there's a lot of different like diagnoses, and um, but there's also some that are just kind of on the outside, or there's some gray that they still need services. I
Mm-hmm.
also had parents reach out to me that have said like, my child doesn't look disabled. I feel bad about this, and I don't want parents to feel like that, because the whole reason for my platform is really to talk about Disney being inclusive and for everyone. And you want
Yeah.
everyone to really walk through those gates and truly feel like this is their land. Like this
Yeah.
is and so I think again, like that's where we're going to really have to see how some of this shakes out. And I think again, like the core of it is all the good intentions of Disney, but it's just those unknowns right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you and I were talking about this before, in just that we both fall under that neurodivergent umbrella because of our sons.
Mhm.
So coming from that aspect, and my personal experience, we're not being that affected by it. But then it took me, a bit to step outside of my viewpoint of it and realize all the other people it really is
Yeah.
affecting.
Yeah. And that's where it's been hard. Like even I posted something last night on Instagram and some comments and then DMs came in, and I felt horrible that I either didn't have the answers for them, or
Mm-hmm.
that maybe you were thinking like they wouldn't qualify, and they were talking about how their experience had been really like a game changer with DOS. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. I mean, I think that we're both coming from a place of being empathetic to everyone, and but we just really want to like share the facts of what we know right now, and then also kind of know that this is probably going to evolve a little bit. Like this is huge news, it's a huge change. I think they're going to really work out some of these vague details, and there's probably going to be more changes.
Yeah, I can completely see that a lot more. Maybe even just kinks being worked out.
Yeah. This is also probably extremely hard for the cast members as well. I mean, there's so much goodness in those cast members and the way they are really helping all of the guests. And I hope that they are being treated with kindness, that
Mhm.
they are there to help facilitate their employer's rules. Like
Yeah.
I'm really feeling for them also, because I think that this is a big change that's going to impact what their day to day looks like as well.
Yeah, I can agree with that. I think, in the interviews, but then also in the parks as well. It sounds like, as far as using it in the parks, I have not heard much difference for that. Um, so I'm hoping that piece stays the same, because I think the use in the parks and how they have it readily available right in the app I think that's working great.
Yeah, I think no complaints on that. We haven't heard anything about changes actually like in the parks, so I hope that those will remain, because I think the system that they have set up works really well.
Mhm.
So fingers crossed, no changes there.
Kim and I actually filmed before, all of this news came out. So we had wanted to bring you the latest news with all of Das. So we had a great conversation based on just how her family uses Das and how it's affected her trips in a positive way. And then also just touching on like the neurodivergent aspect of taking kids to Disney or anyone with any neurodivergency to Disney. So I would love to share that conversation with you coming up. So Kim and I have both used DAS. While I'm mostly familiar with it in Disney World, I wanted to bring on more of a Disneyland DAS expert. So Kim is a mom of two who frequents Disneyland with her neurotypical daughter and autistic neurodivergent son. So Kim, I'm just going to like jump right into it and kind of bring up a spicy yet really valid question that I recently received in my DMs. So it says, are you publicly treated differently when using DAS?
Yeah, so that's a really good question, but no, not at all. And I think that it's changed a lot recently because now Disneyland is merging DAS and Lightning Lane together. So there's
Mm.
no really, there's no real like differentiator. I just ask like, is this like the DAS line or Lightning Lane? They say yes, the cast members, and I move on and scan my pass. So I don't feel like we're looked at any differently. Um, a couple trips ago, I did have another guest actually, call out like, hey, this is the exit line. And I just said,
Oh,
well, I have special access. Thank you. And I moved on. But I've never been treated any differently. My son has never been treated differently. I think that is a stigma, I think, with a lot of
yes.
families that they don't want to ask for accommodations.
Mm-hmm.
But please take it from me, like, ask for the accommodations. It makes your life better at Disneyland. And there's never been any sort of differentiation or treatment, um, that I felt in any way. Yeah.
Okay, so moving forward, how do you plan for using DAS in the park with any type of like kind of like a park itinerary?
We always go first thing in the morning. We're always on the monorail. We pre-order food. I mobile order it while I'm on the monorail. So I usually always pre-select my ride while we're eating. And our first ride of the day is always Astro Blasters. We always stop at Galactic Grill because we're getting off the monorail right there in Tomorrowland.
Mm-hmm.
That's my son's favorite ride. We always hit that ride first.
Oh,
Um, so I don't really have necessarily like an itinerary where we have written down every ride. But my kids and I, we plan the night before, we talk about it. We usually try to get on maybe 5 to 6 rides in the beginning half of the day, and then we take a break at the hotel. Because
okay.
again, we're coming back, and we always kind of close down the park with fireworks. We always love to do the Fantasyland rides at night.
Uh-huh.
So using DAS, I am pre-selecting my ride when we are eating. And when I scan in for that first ride, so when I'm scanning in at Astro Blasters while we're waiting in that short queue to get on the ride, I'm now selecting my next ride. And I
Okay.
always try to do it by location. So for us, we try to stay kind of Tomorrowland, Fantasyland, and then we head into Adventureland, New Orleans Square to go on Pirates. So kind of keep in mind where you want to go, or if you've made your must-do list with your family, we kind of select based on that. But I also try to do it by location, so we're not spending a ton of time walking back and forth into
Oh
different
yeah.
areas of the park. So, be mindful of that. And if you're new into the park, it's helpful to kind of look at the map, look online, see where your locations are, because your 20,000 steps add up real quick when you're walking back and forth.
Oh, for sure. And then you add a stroller with that. I mean, because I have
Oh,
younger kids, that stroller parking, all yes, agreed. We try not to
yeah,
crisscross as well.
yeah.
I'm I'm gonna touch on Genie Plus. There's a huge difference between Genie Plus at Disney World and Genie Plus at Disneyland, and
Mhm.
I'm still getting on the Genie Plus at Disneyland. Do you use DAS with Genie Plus there?
I do at times.
Okay.
So I'll give you an example. So now that we are Magic Key holders, you're
Hmm.
not buying Genie Plus ahead of time. You're buying it that day when you've scanned your ticket into the park. You have to scan your ticket to be able to buy Genie Plus, when you're there. So I bought Genie Plus one day last week when we were there. And the reason why I did that is it was very crowded. I was looking at the times where we could ride, when I've reserved DAS, and then I knew that we wanted to hit a bunch of other rides. Keep in mind, on busy days with DAS, you may have an hour between each ride. And what are you going to do in that hour? That's an hour of downtime. And for
Hmm.
some families, an hour between rides, if their kids are smaller or maybe there's mobility issues, an hour may not be a problem. But
Hmm.
we wanted to like hit a bunch of rides and have our break in the afternoon. So because it was a busy day, I decided to buy the DAS. I decided, I'm sorry, I have DAS, but I decided also to buy Genie Plus. So I spent my $72 for three of us. Um, but that really gave us the opportunity to hit all the rides that we wanted. And that day was like a really successful ride day. We hit everything we wanted. We were able to navigate through the crowds. We had reservations stacked between DAS and Genie Plus,
Hmm.
but I only did it one day. The day we went to California Adventure also very busy because food and wine now. Um, each ride was an hour between. So we went on web slingers. We had to wait an hour. So we kind of planned, let's do some snacks.
Hmm.
Let's maybe do animation academy. You know, we
Yeah.
kind of like strolled in between because we knew we had that hour. But if that was our first day, the kids would be, really kind of, what are we going to do? We're bored. We want to go on more rides, or we would be waiting in line. So I do it occasionally. I don't do it every day. I would say for those first time visitors, to buy Genie Plus and DAS for at least one day because
Hmm.
you can really maximize stacking the rides. But it is an added expense. It
Yeah.
can be expensive if you're going multiple days. So I would say buy it one day. And for me, we always do it at Disneyland because
Hmm.
California Adventure for us is a park that we don't ride on, I would say half of the rides. My kids are not, especially my son, are not into like those thrill seeking kind of rides.
Okay.
Incredicoaster, we don't go on that. We don't go on Radiator Springs,
Uh-huh.
anything that is fast. So I want to caution that. Like, think about what park you're going to, the rides you want to hit, and you may want to stack both DAS and Genie Plus.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think having the thought of also just like the crowd levels, because I was going to ask what if there is a long wait, what do you do in between? But being knowledgeable on just the different options that don't have long waits. I mean,
Yeah.
I've got that all day with Disney World. But as far as like Disneyland and California Adventure, it's just yeah, something I'm still navigating. So you'd mentioned the animation experience and
hmm
maybe doing different snacks and stuff.
So, in between rides, we have gone to Animation Academy. That's about 15 to 20 minutes. We've also gone to the Redwood Challenge, which is the play structure, which is really fun. That's now closed right now for refurbishment, but
Okay.
that is something to do. But also something to keep in mind, that area does get crowded. So if you are dealing with a little one or an individual that has some sensory issues, that is a good break spot area, but also be mindful of the crowds because there are some narrow spaces. And if there are a lot of kids running around, that's something to be mindful of. But that
Hmm.
it is something that we do. We also just kind of stroll throughout California Adventure. We'll get a snack, we'll maybe look at some shops, but we don't have as many things to do at California Adventure because, as I mentioned, my kids and the rides. At Disneyland, we have a lot of time where we are breaking between rides. We always walk through Sleeping Beauty's castle. That takes about 15 to 20 minutes, but we kind of stroll through Sleeping Beauty's castle.
Uh-huh.
My kids love Tom Sawyer's Island, love it.
Okay. Yeah.
We just last week, we were there for about an hour. The kids were running around. The weather was really nice. You know, Last year when we were there at 4th of July, I was really surprised because there weren't that many crowds. And we spent a lot of time over there. There's a lot of areas to take breaks. There's private restrooms, it's a really good area for breaks. Now with the treehouse in Adventureland, we'll walk through that. But that's also something that there is a very narrow pathway. There can be a lot
Hmm.
of people, so it can be overwhelming. But there are a lot of areas to take breaks, and I always think like take advantage of that in between those breaks between rides. So, you know, something to keep in mind. Sometimes my son just needs his device just for, a 5 quick 10-minute break, to
Yeah.
just kind of decompress. we
Hmm.
get a snack, we find a place to sit. So it's always good to think of those like non-attractions
Yeah.
between those, breaks between rides.
Yeah. Such a good point. So we kind of established, I think, using it in the park and different rides and whatnot. But what
Mhm.
are the actual steps to booking it?
Yeah, so it's just like you're using for Genie Plus. So for anyone that is new, you are going on your Disneyland app, you're typing in the ride, and if you have DAS or Lightning Lane, those two little icons will come up. You select DAS, and it will tell you the next time that it is available. You click the people in your party and select that ride, and then it shows up. Much
Okay.
like the Lightning Lane will come up with different times, and you can select times or different rides. But this one, it gives you the time that the ride is available. And again, you're just selecting the time, you're selecting the people in your party and clicking on that bottom button, confirm, and then it's there. So it's pretty easy. I also would recommend before you're going to familiarize yourself with the Disneyland app. There's a ton of really great footage. You can always reach out to me for questions, but it is a really good way. I would definitely recommend knowing the app before you get into the park because there is a bit of a learning curve on the app as well.
Yeah. I think, yeah, knowing the app, but then also, like you said earlier, just knowing, having like an idea of the map and layout of the park too.
Hmm.
Those are two like hot things that I feel like we
Yeah,
should know before hopping in.
totally. I would say definitely don't go in blindly. Don't think
Oh,
you're going
yeah.
to go in and be able to survive winging it. So,
Oh, no.
yes.
For both, yeah, both parks on either coast. I totally agree with that. So once you're in the park, and this is something that has kind of prevented me from moving forward with DAS in Disneyland. I'm being completely honest. I opted to do Genie Plus and just focus on that on our last Disneyland trip, because I was just nervous about navigating this part. So
Mhm.
using DAS in queues that don't have a lightning lane, where do you go?
Yeah, so as I mentioned before, the woman said, "Hey, this is the exit." So, and that was on the teacups. But what
Mm,
I do is for teacups, Mr. Toad, um, I believe the carousel, maybe Dumbo, those
uh-huh.
rides do not have those lightning lane queues, so you would go through the exit. But in Fantasyland, I think they're very sensitive. They being cast members, they're very sensitive to that they have
Okay.
now where they've added little kiosks. So at Teacups, they
Uh,
don't have anyone. So I'm usually flagging down someone,
uh-huh.
hey, I have a return time, and they tell me to come in through the exit. At
Okay.
Alice, there is right next to the White Rabbit's house, there is a kiosk with an umbrella that you can give your return time. Mr.
Okay.
Toad, you're going through the exit. Peter Pan, there is a kiosk. There is also a kiosk outside of Snow White. So we use it at night in Fantasyland because as I mentioned, we always stay, we always watch fireworks, and we always hit the Fantasyland rides after fireworks because the crowds are reduced. And we
Okay.
just think it's fun going on those rides at night. So
Uh-huh.
there aren't as many people, but I can definitely see where it could be challenging in the middle of the day with all the strollers and
Mm-hmm.
navigating through that. So you may want to consider different times to do those rides for those specific reasons. But
Mm-hmm.
I think it's good just to be mindful of the crowds because I think also it's just really hard to navigate Fantasyland up those exit lines when there are a lot of people. So you may want to
Yes.
consider doing that like first thing in the morning, or if you're staying, I know your kids are small, so if you're staying after fireworks, if your kids
Uh-huh.
can hang, then do that then when the crowds are reduced.
Okay. But yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's what also kind of deterred me, was just those heavy crowds, and it's such a, I guess, heavily populated area
Yeah.
and dense. So
Yeah.
that's, but knowing that it is the exit queue, I think that really helps me, because when I have no direction, I'm such a rule follower that I'm like, okay, we just go in the line. But that's really good.
Yeah, and at California Adventure, almost
Hmm.
all the rides there have Lightning Lane. So
Hmm.
I think some of the smaller rides, like maybe not the
Oh
silly
yeah.
symphony swings, and then the like that octopus drop
Hmm.
ride, the
Uh-huh.
little kitty ride. I don't think
Yeah.
that, but I think that those may be a couple of them, but everywhere else there are the Lightning Lanes.
Okay. So can I ask, how has DAS changed your Disney trips since you started using it?
So our first time we used it, my son was 5, as I mentioned earlier, and that was our first trip to Disneyland with a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I had also brought my sister and her little kids, so there was a lot of us. So that time it was really helpful because we had a lot of little kids, and my son, we were just figuring things out with him, like an example I'll give you, it's a little off topic, but like that was the time that Paint the Night was around, and I think at that time he was on sensory overload. I remember us
Hmm.
sitting kind of on the curb and he was sitting on my lap, and he physically turned around into me and just fell asleep, like he was just
Oh,
on overload.
uh-huh.
But I also think that having access to the rides and not having to wait, contributed positively, and it still continues to do that for us now. One thing to be mindful with DAS, I think, for anyone in your family, especially for the people that need it, but you also consider the people that are with the people that need it. My
Yeah.
son will ask, guaranteed, even though we have a plan, he will ask 20 times, can we go back to the hotel? Can we get a snack? Like, it is still a lot for him. Even though
Hmm.
we have a plan, he's very used to the park. If we had to wait hours in each ride, we would probably only hit a couple of rides per day, and it would really change the experience for my daughter. And one thing about being, you know, this platform that I'm in is I really feel like Disneyland is for everyone. You just have to figure out how to do it and have it work for your family. So DAS has been a game changer and has really significantly improved our experience at Disneyland. And it has been, I would say, the contributing factor of how we've been so successful doing Disneyland and how we're able to go so frequently because my son is comfortable there. He knows how to navigate with the past for our family, and we know how to navigate for him.
Hmm.
So it has really been a game changer. It has helped us substantially, and I would encourage anyone to apply for it because it will change your experience at Disneyland for the positive.
Yeah, I think that's completely huge. And then the first time that I finally decided, like, okay, this is a thing that we'll at least apply for, and then we ended up being able to use it, I explain it the same way. It's a game changer for us. And
Mhm.
you had mentioned thinking about not only the individual that is the one, needing the service, but the people you're with. Like, I've talked to a cast member during the interview and shared just kind of how our sensory disorders affect the other people, the other guests
Mhm.
that we don't even know that we're in line with. And I think that's another piece to it that I don't always, I guess, consider like everyone else around us, but having been in that experience and seeing how sometimes our actions can affect other people's and their experience, that's where like DAS also just really comes into play. And then it helps me not feel so, I think, anxious and just feel like all eyes are on me because of these, behaviors that are acting in line. It like really reduces that for me as well. So it's been so helpful for us in that way.
Yeah, I would also touch on that as well, just to tag on what you're saying. Like, when you are a parent and bringing your kids to Disneyland, whether you're a solo parent, whether you're a parent, a grandparent, whatever it is, it's very overwhelming just bringing your kids there to begin with. There's a lot of crowds. There's a lot. You're parenting in a new location.
Hmm.
So any time that you can have help with that, I think it significantly reduces the stress and just the feelings of overwhelm for the parents or the caregivers that are there. And to your point, also the people surrounding you. So it is 100% a game changer. And I will shout this to the rooftops. Like, it has significantly changed our experience for the better. And it has made us the most successful at Disneyland using this accommodation.
Oh, I love that. That's like goosebumps. Very
Hmm.
heartwarming. What would you say to a parent out there that is nervous about taking their neurodivergent child to Disney?
So, as I mentioned, like, this is really why I'm here, is I want to share that Disneyland is for everyone. And as I mentioned, Disneyland may look different for you, but different isn't wrong. It's not bad. It's just different. You know your child and you know what your child needs. And think of that now in this new location. And also you as a parent. So take breaks. Think about like planning an extra day to have rest days. You know, don't push your kids past their limits. You know, just think about that going in, having a plan. Yes, it's nerve-wracking, it's overwhelming, but it is possible, but it is maybe a little bit different at a slower pace. Requesting the access, asking for support, getting that help and plan ahead of time will really make the difference for you. But there are so many different things that you can do at Disneyland to take breaks, to have those other attractions besides rides, to give your kids a really fun experience and to make those memories. I say do it. Don't let your challenges with your don't let your challenges with your children stop you, because there's always different things to do, and there's that true magic to be had there. And you'll never get that time back. So I say do it, plan ahead, think about it, work with the travel planner, work with someone who knows Disney, either Disneyland or Disney World, to help guide you through it. And I say go for it.
Yeah, and I just want to really point out that like Kim's socials, if you feel like you're alone in like taking, just to neurodivergent children to Disney, I think like go and just dive into Kim's socials, because she does a really good job on like just sharing you're not alone. Like this is normal, and she's really supportive in what she shares. So definitely go find her find her on
Thank
Instagram for
you.
that. Yeah. And you obviously have a ton of experience with taking your own family to Disneyland, navigating the parks with your family, but you also help other families as well, right? So can you tell us more about what you do?
Yeah, so I just started working as a travel planner, and I am now newly certified as an autism travel professional. So I know what it's like working with my son and taking him to the park, but now I want to help other families and really help them like experience that magic. So if you are interested in taking a trip to Disneyland, Disney World, Disney Cruise Line, any of the Disney properties, with a child with special needs, please reach out. I'm happy to share my experience and share my knowledge. And I truly believe that Disney is for everyone. So I'm really excited about that. I'm also starting a Substack coming soon, where I am interviewing experts, so child psychologists, people in the autism related fields, to help really be able to prepare parents for traveling with their kids. Visit my socials. I have a link in my bio, and yeah, I'm really excited about what's to come and to help families really be able to experience that magic.
Awesome. Kim, you have shared so much information on DAS and Disneyland that like I really appreciate it for myself, because like I said, I've been kind of, deterred from using DAS at Disneyland, but I feel like this just conversation in itself just kind of gives me that reassurance on what to expect. So I know
Yeah,
that I can navigate it. So thank you for all of that. If you're planning a trip to Disney, you'll definitely want to get in touch with Kim. I will be linking all of her information in the description, so you'll have direct contact for her. Like I said, her social media is just full of making you feel seen, heard, and not alone. So that'll be in there as well. If you have any DAS or Disney questions, feel free to reach out to Kim, myself, or leave any questions in the comments. We are here definitely to support you. We'll answer any question. And thank you for joining us. We'll see you in the next Magic Chat.
thank you.